In the late 2nd century AD, China stood on the edge of collapse. What had once been one of the most powerful and centralized empires in the ancient world, the Han Dynasty, was slowly disintegrating under the weight of corruption, rebellion, famine, and internal decay. From this chaos would emerge one of the most legendary periods in world history, remembered not only for its endless wars but for its towering personalities, brilliant strategies, and moral dilemmas. This was the era known as the Three Kingdoms. The story begins with the Han Dynasty, which had ruled China for over 4 centuries. By the late 100s AD, the Han government was no longer controlled by capable emperors, but by court factions, eunuchs, and warlords who used the imperial system for personal gain. Heavy taxation crushed peasants, while natural disasters and food shortages pushed millions to desperation. Trust in the emperor collapsed, and with it, the idea of a unified China. In 184 AD, this simmering crisis exploded into open rebellion. A massive peasant uprising, known as the Yellow Turban Rebellion, erupted across northern China. Led by Zhang Jiao, a healer and religious figure, the rebels believed the Han Dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule. Wearing yellow headscarves as a symbol of renewal, hundreds of thousands rose against the state. The Han government managed to suppress the rebellion, but the cost was enormous. To crush the Yellow Turbans, the imperial court had armed regional generals and local strongmen. Once the rebellion ended, these commanders refused to disband their armies. China fractured into zones of military power, each ruled by a warlord in name of the emperor, but loyal only to himself. Among these rising figures was a man whose ambition would reshape Chinese history, Cao Cao. Cao Cao began as a minor official with a sharp mind and ruthless pragmatism. Unlike many warlords who relied solely on brute force, Cao Cao understood administration, logistics, and political manipulation. He famously declared that he would rather betray the world than let the world betray him, a statement that would define both his genius and his reputation. As the Han court descended into chaos, Cao Cao positioned himself as the defender of imperial authority. In reality, he used the emperor as a political tool. By placing Emperor Xian under his protection, Cao Cao gained legitimacy over rival warlords while controlling the central government from behind the scenes. While Cao Cao consolidated power in the north, southern China followed a different path. In the fertile lands south of the Yangtze River, another warlord was building strength. Sun Jian later succeeded by his son Sun Si and grandson Sun Quan. The Sun family ruled through charisma, naval strength, and regional loyalty. Unlike Cao Cao's centralized control, the South relied on local elites and river-based defenses. At the same time, a third force began to emerge, weaker at first but destined for greatness. This force would be led by a man remembered not for ambition, but for virtue. Liu Bei. Liu Bei claimed descent from the imperial Han family, though his early life was marked by poverty. He sold straw sandals to survive and possessed no land, no army, and little political power. What Liu Bei did have was an extraordinary ability to inspire loyalty. His belief in restoring the Han Dynasty attracted followers who would become legends in their own right. Among them were Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, sworn brothers bound by an oath of loyalty. Guan Yu was revered for his honor and martial prowess, while Zhang Fei was fierce, impulsive, and terrifying in battle. Together with Liu Bei, they formed the moral heart of what would later become the Kingdom of Shu. As warlords clashed across China, alliances formed and shattered with alarming speed. Loyalty was fluid, survival uncertain. Battles were not only fought with armies but with deception, diplomacy, and betrayal. The turning point of the era came in 208 AD, At a place that would become immortal in history, the Battle of Red Cliffs. Cao Cao, having unified much of northern China, marched south with a massive army, determined to crush the southern warlords and reunify the empire. His force was enormous, possibly numbering hundreds of thousands, though historical figures vary. Confident in his superiority, Cao Cao expected a swift victory. But the south was different. The southern coalition, led by Sun Quan and advised by brilliant strategists like Zhou Yu, understood their enemy's weakness. Cao Cao's northern troops were unfamiliar with naval warfare, the southern climate, and river-based combat. Disease spread through his camps. Morale weakened. Liu Bei, fleeing from Cao Cao's advance, allied with Sun Quan. Though Liu Bei's forces were small, his strategist Zhu Zhiliang played a crucial diplomatic role, persuading the South to resist rather than submit. At Red Cliffs, the impossible happened. Using fireships launched against Cao Cao's fleet, whose ships had been chained together for stability, the Southern Alliance turned Cao Cao's advantage into catastrophe. Flames tore through the fleet. Panic spread. Cao Cao's army collapsed in retreat. The Battle of Red Cliffs ended Cao's dream of immediate unification and permanently divided China into three spheres of power. From the ashes of this battle emerged the three kingdoms. In the north, Cao Cao ruled as chancellor, though never declaring himself emperor. After his death, his son Cao Pi would formally end the Han Dynasty and establish the Kingdom of Wei. In the south, Sun Quan solidified his rule over the Yangtze region, eventually founding the Kingdom of Wu. In the west, Liu Bei carved out a kingdom in Sichuan, declaring himself Emperor of Shuhan in the name of restoring the Han Dynasty. Though these kingdoms claimed legitimacy, none held the mandate of heaven uncontested. What followed was not peace, but decades of relentless warfare. Cao Cao's death in 220 AD marked the formal end of the Han Dynasty. His son Cao Pi forced Emperor Xian to abdicate, ending over 400 years of Han rule. With this act, the illusion of unity finally collapsed. Wei became the most powerful of the three kingdoms, controlling the north's population and resources. Its armies were disciplined, its bureaucracy efficient, and its rulers pragmatic. But Wei was plagued by internal intrigue, court conspiracies, and a lack of moral legitimacy in the eyes of many. Shu, by contrast, was smaller and weaker, but driven by idealism. Liu Bei believed deeply in restoring the Han, and his rule emphasized loyalty and virtue. His chief strategist, Zhu Zhiliang, became the symbol of wisdom itself. His careful planning, innovations in logistics, and strict discipline kept Shu alive against overwhelming odds. Wu relied on geography and naval strength. Protected by rivers and lakes, Wu became a maritime power, excelling in river warfare and defense. Sun Quan ruled for decades, maintaining stability through balance rather than conquest. The wars between the three kingdoms were not a single conflict, but a series of campaigns, raids, alliances, and betrayals stretching over 60 years. Battles were fought not only by soldiers but by mind strategists, whose decisions could determine the fate of millions. Zhu Zhiliang's northern campaigns against Wei became legendary. Though ultimately unsuccessful, they demonstrated how strategy, discipline, and logistics could challenge superior numbers. His death marked the beginning of Shu's decline. Wei eventually fell not to Shu or Wu, but to internal power struggles. The Sima family, originally generals serving Wei, seized control of the government. In 265 AD, Sima Yan forced the last Wei emperor to abdicate, founding the Jin dynasty. One by one, the kingdoms fell. Shu was conquered first, weakened by corruption and the loss of its greatest leaders. Wu held out longer, protected by geography, but eventually succumbed in 280. AD, when the Jin Dynasty launched a massive coordinated invasion. After nearly a century of division, China was reunified, but at immense cost. The Three Kingdoms era left behind more than ruins and graves. It became the foundation of Chinese historical identity. Its figures were immortalized in literature, especially in the novel romance of the Three Kingdoms, which transformed history into moral drama. Heroes became legends. Villains became symbols. History blended with myth. Yet beneath the romance lies a brutal truth. The Three Kingdoms Wars devastated China. Millions died. Cities burned. Families were destroyed. Unity was lost for generations. And still, the era endures. Because it was not just a war for land, but a war for legitimacy, loyalty, and the soul of empire itself. As the Han Dynasty collapsed completely, China entered an age where loyalty became fluid, betrayal was common, and survival depended on power rather than legitimacy. The Three Kingdoms Wei, Shu, and Wu were no longer theoretical rivals. They were fully formed states, each claiming to be the rightful successor of the Han. Cao Pi, son of Cao Cao, formally ended the Han Dynasty in 220 CE by forcing the last Han emperor to abdicate. He declared himself Emperor of Wei. This act was revolutionary and dangerous. For centuries, the mandate of heaven was believed to rest with the Han. By seizing the throne, Cao Pi challenged not just political authority, but cosmic order. Liu Bei responded by declaring himself Emperor of Shu Han in 221 CE, claiming he was restoring the Han lineage rather than destroying it. In the south, Sun Quan ruled Wu, initially hesitating to take the imperial title, carefully balancing legitimacy with survival. By 229 CE, he too declared himself emperor. China was now officially divided. The wars that followed were not brief clashes, but decades of grinding conflict, diplomacy, and attrition. Unlike earlier rebellions, these wars involved large standing armies, fortified cities, and complex logistics. Warfare had evolved. One of the most significant campaigns of this era was Liu Bei's invasion of eastern Wu, driven by grief and rage over the death of Guan Yu, who had been captured and executed by Wu forces. Liu Bei launched a massive campaign in 221 CE. Strategically, it was a disastrous decision. Ignoring the advice of Zhuge Liang, Liu Bei personally led his army east. The Wu general Lu Xun adopted a defensive strategy, avoiding direct confrontation. He allowed Liu Bei's forces to advance deep into unfamiliar terrain, stretching their supply lines. Then, in the summer heat, Lu Xun launched a sudden counterattack, burning Shu camps and annihilating Liu Bei's army at the Battle of Yiling. The defeat was catastrophic. Shu lost tens of thousands of soldiers, experienced commanders, and its momentum. Liu Bei retreated, humiliated, and ill. He died shortly afterward in 223 CE. Before his death, Liu Bei entrusted his young son Liu Shan to Zhuge Liang, famously telling him that if the son proved incompetent, Zhuge Liang should take the throne himself. This moment cemented Zhuge Liang's reputation as the ultimate loyal minister. Zhuge Liang effectively became the ruler of Shu, though he never claimed the imperial title. His vision was clear. Shu must strengthen internally and challenge Wei through carefully planned northern campaigns. Between 228 and 234 CE, Zhuge Liang launched a series of northern expeditions against Wei. These campaigns were disciplined, methodical, and strategically sound, but ultimately unsuccessful. Wei possessed greater population, resources, and industrial capacity. Every gain Shu made came at enormous cost. The most famous confrontation of these campaigns was Zhuge Liang's rivalry with Sima Yi, Wei's top general and strategist. Where Zhuge Liang was meticulous and idealistic, Sima Yi was patient and pragmatic. He avoided risky battles, choosing instead to outlast Shu through defense and attrition. This was not a war of dramatic victories but of endurance. Zhuge Liang died in 234 CE during the Fifth Northern Expedition, exhausted by years of campaigning. His death marked the beginning of Shu's decline. Without his leadership, Shu lacked both strategic vision and capable administrators. Meanwhile, Wei was changing from within. The Cao family's grip on Wei weakened as powerful clans gained influence. Among them, the Sima family rose steadily. Sima Yi survived multiple purges and outmaneuvered rivals through patience and political skill. In 249 CE, his sons orchestrated a coup, eliminating the Cao regents and seizing real power in Wei. Though the Cao emperors remained on the throne, they were figureheads. The true authority now lay with the Sima clan. In the southeastern, Wu maintained its independence through naval strength and defensive geography. However, internal instability plagued Wu, succession disputes, court intrigues, and factionalism weakened the state. While Wu survived longer than Shu, it never achieved decisive dominance. By 263 CE, Wei launched a coordinated invasion of Shu, exploiting internal corruption and weak leadership. Wei forces bypassed Shu's defenses through mountain passes once thought impassable. Shu collapsed with shocking speed. Emperor Liu Shan surrendered without major resistance. The fall of Shu shocked China. The state founded on legitimacy and loyalty vanished, not through epic defeat, but through decay. Wu stood alone. But Wei itself was no longer Wei. In 265 CE, Sima Yan, grandson of Sima Yi, forced the abdication of the last Wei emperor and declared the Jin Dynasty. The cycle repeated, a dynasty born from war, claiming the mandate of heaven. Jin turned its attention south. In 280 CE, Jin launched a massive invasion of eastern Wu using both land and naval forces. Wu, weakened by internal strife and poor leadership, could not resist. After decades of division, China was reunified under Jin. The Three Kingdoms era was over, yet its legacy far outlived its brief political existence. Though it lasted only about 60 years as formal states, the period reshaped Chinese culture forever. Confucian ideals of loyalty, righteousness, and duty were tested and redefined. Military strategy evolved. Bureaucratic governance adapted to wartime realities. Most importantly, memory transformed history into legend. Centuries later, the historical record was blended with folklore and the novel romance of the Three Kingdoms. In this version, heroes became larger than life. Zhuge Liang gained supernatural intelligence. Guan Yu became a god of loyalty and war. Battles were dramatized, motivations moralized. The novel shaped East Asian culture as profoundly as Homer shaped the West. But behind the romance lies a brutal truth. The Three Kingdoms Wars were not glorious. They were devastating. Millions died. Entire regions were depopulated. Agriculture collapsed. Families were displaced. The land itself was scarred by constant warfare. This era demonstrated a timeless lesson of history. When central authority collapses, power fragments, and war becomes inevitable. The Three Kingdoms were not created because people wanted division. They emerged because unity failed. And though China was eventually reunited, the cost was immense. The Three Kingdoms. Wars remind us that history is not just about empires rising and falling. It is about people navigating chaos, choosing loyalty or survival, and leaving behind stories that outlive the bloodshed. That is why, nearly 2,000 years later, the Three Kingdoms still matter.